constructor. That's basically the work of a constructor. The constructor comes here and initialize the variables that you are passing into this particular instance, so they are accessible within that class. So yeah, that's it. Back to what we were talking about previously. I think you're talking about inheritance. So now we have a class. We are defining a new class called electric car. So now this new electric car extends from car, from our class car, right? And now we are saying that this electric car is a new car that uses what? It uses battery. It has a battery. It's electric. It uses battery that is powered by battery, but it still has the characteristics of a normal car. So it has a make, it has a model, and it has a year. So now we are extending the characteristics from the car into this new electric car. So this new electric car now has the models from a normal car and the new characteristic of this electric car, right? And this super basically calls the constructor in our parent class. That's the car class. So this super calls the constructor in this class and instantiates all of these variables that were defined, that were passed, or that were being used in the parent class. So now they are now accessible here as well. So here we can come here and say this dot let's just do something. Let's move our get my properties here. So if we call get my properties here, we'll still have access to the make, the model, and the year, the way we did in the parent class. And let's see. Okay, this is an electric car, and it takes a new parameter that says battery size. So let's say the battery size is 12 volts. So now when we call, so let's call charge battery. Let's call charge battery. Let's see what it says. So it says that the battery is charging, right? And now let's see the characteristic of this electric car. Get me my properties. So now you can see it returns the characteristic of the electric car. That's the Toyota, the Corolla, and the 1967. Now let's try something. If we don't call super, what do you think will happen? Can you see? It doesn't have access to so what does this error say? Reference to must call super constructor in a derived class. So it's basically telling you that you must call the super constructor in a derived class because you need to call the constructor that was defined in the parent class. I don't know if that's clear. If you have any question, please don't hesitate to ask. So it's very important for you to initialize your super constructor in your derived class as well. Okay, that's inheritance, and the next thing is polymorphism. Any questions? Any questions so far? Any questions so far? Okay. I believe you all understood it then. Let me just copy this code for you guys and put it. Yeah. Okay. So polymorphism. What is polymorphism? 1, 2, 3, 4. Polymorphism. So, what is polymorphism? Polymorphism basically allows methods to do different things based on the object it is acting upon. Even though they share the same, name. Now, what does this mean? It basically, so the definition says polymorphism allows methods to do different things based on the object it is acting upon, even though they share the same name. And this allows for flexibility and integration of various object types. So you can have a class that has several derived classes that do different things. So let's see what polymorphism is in English word and translate from there. So it's basically something that has different, I can take different shapes. Polymorphism meaning. So DNA and polymorphism refers to presence of two or more variant forms of specific DNA sequence. In simple words, having multiple forms. So this is exactly what I'm looking for. So polymorphism simply means something having multiple forms, and that's exactly what the concept is about. Let's look at this example. So let's say we have a class called animal. Now, the class animal makes sound, right? And let's say it returns a generic sound. Now we can extend the class dog. What does a dog do? A dog makes sound, but it does what? It barks. A dog barks, right? And a cat will make sound, and a cat does meow, meow. Then if we decide to, now let's call a function make animal sound that takes a particular animal and returns the sound that the animal makes. So now we have a dog instance and we have a cat instance. Now let's call now we call the function make animal sound with the instance we've created. So we'd expect that this should return. Let's just do this together. Let's copy this to our code editor so we can run it. Okay. So now when we call, so now we can see that this make sound is generic. Generic simply means it can take any default, it can take any form and it can be changed later. But the dog makes a barking sound and the cat makes a meow sound. So now if we call dog here, if we call this function make animal sound with the dog instance, what do you think will happen? The dog barks, right? Despite both of them inheriting from the same class and making different changes, we've been able to make the form of this make sound function as dynamic as possible. So we can basically now extend from the base animal class, and each new animal we are defining can define its own sound. So we can basically come here again and say we want to create a new animal called the animal cow. And the cow extends from the animal class, and the cow sound is what? Moo. So now we can keep extending from the base class or the parent class and modifying the sound. So this is the concept behind polymorphism. So now this our animal class takes this method in our animal class takes several forms. It takes several forms. It can be barking today based on the type of animal. If it's a dog, if it's a cat, it can meow. If it's a cow, it can moo, and all of that. So that's the concept behind polymorphism. So now let's see, and the last one is cow. So cat and cow. So we can see the different shapes or forms that the animal class has now taken. Like the method in animal class has now taken. So now what's the next thing? Creating classes and objects. We already did this. I already explained this with what we just did earlier, but let's just touch this quickly. So creating classes and objects, we create classes with the class keyword, which we just saw. So let's say we create a class person, and we define a constructor, which I just spoke about earlier. The constructor is basically just helps us um, define the variables within that instance. So the name, and let's say this function, this class person, we take two parameters, name and age. So we can pass the name to this name in this instance and pass the age to the age in this instance. And that way we can always use these variables anywhere in this class. So let's say we want to greet, for example. So we can say, hello, my name is this. Now, this is basically, I expect people asking me questions. For example, now you should ask me that what is this? Let's see something. Um, let's define a new method called console and return console.log this. So let's see what this will return to us. I need to copy this to our editor again. So let's say this person is called Sunday equals new person. His name is Tunde. Let's say his age is 25. Let's just leave it at that. Now let's console.log. Let's greet. No, now let's console this. That's what I want us to take a look at. So now we can see the this. So now this basically refers to the objects or the variables defined within this instance. So now we've defined name, which is Tunde, and age, which is 25. So that everything is accessible within this object. And that's basically how this works. So now, because we've assigned them here, we can easily come here and use this dot name, and this dot name will reference whatever name was passed into the function, into the class rather, and this dot age references whatever age was passed into the class as well. And that is that. So that's how we define classes. The next thing, creating objects. Our time is almost up. Don't want us to spend more than 1 hour. Other people have joined. Creating objects. So we already know what this is. An object is an instance of a class, and we know what an instance is as well. An instance of a class is gotten by calling a class with the new keyword. And yep, an object is an instance of a class. It is created by calling the class as if it were a function. So basically what we've been doing by coming here and doing basically what we did there, coming here and doing const Tunde equals new person. So we basically call the class here as if it's a function, and we've passed the variables to it. So now this Tunde is what is an instance of this person class. I explained this the last time, so we shouldn't dwell too much on that. And that is basically what this example is talking about. So basically, We call person one instance. We have person one instance that is derived from calling our person class as a function with the new keyword, and we pass the variables Alice and 30 to it. And now we can easily come to person one and call functions that we defined in our person class, or method rather. So now we have this greet method that we defined in our person class. So we can easily come here and call person.greet. So this person one um object or instance now has access to this greet method that we defined. Any questions? Any question? Any question? Any question? Please, people should have question now. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir. No question from me.
Okay. So, what are instance variables and methods? So, instance variables are variables that are unique to each instance of a class, and methods are functions that are defined within a class that operate on instances of that class, which is what I just spoke about. This greet is a method that is defined in our person class, and we can call, and for every instance that we define, we can easily call the greet on that instance, and it will be accessible. So these are just definitions. So that's what the method is. The methods are functions that are defined within the class, and they operate on instances of that class. Okay, so class variables are methods. Next thing we have class variables and methods. So what are class variables and methods? Class variables are variables that are shared among all instances of a class. I'll show us what this is, because this is quite tricky. And class methods are methods that are bound to that class and not the instance. What does this mean? Let's look at this example. So now look at this class called dog. We've defined it with, okay, it takes two variables, name and breed, and it assigns those variables to the this object for each instance. Then we define a method called what? Back. And in back, we call the name of the dog that we are defining its instance, and we pass what says wolf to it. So now, this variable name and breed is shared across every instance of this dog class. So if we come here and call, for example, now this one is dog one, which defines new dog, body, golden retriever. If we come here and call dog two, give me a minute, please. I'm coming. Okay. Okay, I found what I was looking for. So now we say class variables are basically shared among all instances of a class. Let's use this example instead. We'll come back to this. So now this, let's say we define the variable called let's do this instead. Um let me type this one after the other for us. So let's say we defined a, I have to change this example. So let's say we have a class called studog, class dog, deleted the complete initial constructor. The constructor takes name, the name of the dog. What's the second? Is this the species or what's this? What's the second variable of that dog? The breed. Okay. It takes breed. It takes the name and the breed. Now we can have a variable in here called species. Let's try this in our real code. Okay, so let's say we have a variable in here called species. Let's define our constructor to the end. This dot name equals name, and this dot breed equals breed. Right, so now we have a variable called species, and the species is basically a species of dog. Let's call it I don't know species of dog, so let me look for one species to use. Silky Australian Shepherd. So let's say this one is called Australian Shepherd. So now we can, and the dog barks. When it barks, it returns. When it barks, it returns the name of the dog. This dot name says wolf. The species is this dot species. Okay, so now when we come here and call, so now we can see that initially we were passing our variables from here. For example, for this dog class, we pass the variable, which is the name of the dog and the breed of the dog. The name of the dog is, let's say, Bingo, and the breed of the dog is Golden Retriever. We are passing the name and the breed here. But now we've done something else. We've defined a variable inside the class itself called Australian Shepherd. And what does this mean? That means this particular variable is tied to this class, and is the same across all instances of that class. So that's why we said class variables are variables that are shared among all instances of a class. So now if we come here and say it's back, so if you come here and say dog.back, we can see that Bingo says wolf, the species is what? Australian Shepherd. If we come here and say dog2 equals new dog Fido Labrador, it will still say Bingo says we didn't call the second one. Let's call the second one dog2. So now we can see it says Bingo says wolf, the species is Australian Shepherd. Now Fido says wolf, the species is what? Australian Shepherd. Why? Because this particular variable now is tied to this class itself and is shared and is going to be shared across all instances of this class. So even if we decline even if we define this class 1 million times, it will always be a species of what? Of Australian Shepherd. So that's basically what it means to say it is shared across all instances. And we can easily come here and say, can also come here and say console.log dog1 dot species. We also have access to the species variable, Australian Shepherd. Do I explain static to you guys now? No, let's just keep going. So the next thing is what? Let's talk about the class methods next. So what do we say class methods are? Class methods are methods that are bound to the class and not the instance. What does this mean? Let's say we call where is our I want to some examples now that are not in our notes that I need to include. Okay, let me just copy this for us here. This is the example for class variable, and this is the example for class method. Okay, let's still reuse this. And so now let's say we still have a class dog. So now let's say the dog has a it takes variables name and breed. As that, it has a species of Australian Shepherd. Let's say this is static. Because it is shared across everyone. And let's define the total number of dogs to be 0. So a class variable. So this is a class variable to let's say we want to use this. Just move this to our editor. So now we want to track the number of dogs with these total dogs. So now let's say we call a function called so now we are defining a function called get total dogs. And the reason I'm calling it static is because it is tied to this class and it shouldn't change. So I'm basically calling it static,
Yeah,
meaning
excuse me, sir.
okay, yeah.
The static, is it like the same thing as like constant?
Yes, it's a JavaScript constant. It's recognized by JavaScript itself. Let's see, static keyword. Exactly. It's the JavaScript constant, static keyword in JavaScript. So the static keyword defines a static method or field for a class, such as functions to create or clone objects, whereas static properties are useful for caches, this, or data that you don't want to be replicated across instances. So what this basically tells us is we don't want this to be recreated, and we want this same value across every instance that is created from that class. So even if we call this class 1,000,001 times, it will still reference the same method that is tied to that particular class. So let's say we have so for example, now this variable called species, now we call this static because it will never change. It's tied to this class. Even if we define 100 instances of this class dog, it will always be what? A species of Australian Shepherd. So that's basically what the static does. And so let's say we have a constructor. In our constructor, let's increment the number of dogs. So dogs dot total dogs plus plus. Yep. So this plus plus simply means increment it by 1. This is what. Why did this guy change it again? Dog dot total dogs. So what it simply does is it takes dog dot total dogs and adds 1 to it. Takes dog dot total dogs, adds 1 to it, and assigns it to dog dot total dogs. So if at this point dog dot total dogs was 0, when we add 1 to it, it now becomes what? 1. Exactly. So that's basically what that is doing. So we can easily do dog to total dogs plus plus is the same as plus equals. Okay, so now let's return dogs dot total dogs. If you have any question, please ask. 8:15. Dog dot total dogs. So now if we call get total dogs, it's going to return to us the total number of dogs. Okay, so now let's see the difference. Yep, expected that. Back is no longer defined here. And specie is still the same. Okay. So now because we call this static, now this is it. Because we call this static, it is no longer accessible to that instance. Can we see the difference here? If we don't call it static, it's still it's tied to the class, but it's still accessible to every instance of that class. So we can easily access Australian Shepherd, especially Australian Shepherd here, that is defined within this class. But now, if we call it static, if we make it a static variable, I'm basically telling it that I don't want you to be tied to this instance anymore. So the instance, we will no longer know what that variable means or what that variable does. So the variable will be undefined at this point, and the only way to access that variable is by calling the dog class. So it's basically a way of telling you that your instance cannot change it. This is constant across everywhere. This is constant across everywhere, and it's tied to this class. So that's the difference between using the static keyword and not using the static keyword. I think for now, I would not use it. We can call this get this on our instance. Let this total dogs be static, but the specie should not be static. Okay, so dog dot get total dogs. Dog, let's do this one after the other. Who's calling me now? So dog one, sorry, the dog class dot get total dogs now will return to us the number of dogs that we have defined. So let's say we defined 3, dog 4, dog 5, dog 6. Complete it for me now. Rex. Let's see. Bingo, golden retriever. We've done bingo before. No, we've done this one before. Let's change the name. Fidos, Labrados, golden retriever. So now, when we call get total dogs, what do we expect to get? We expect to get 5 dogs, right? 6 dogs rather, right? 6. So what this does is for each For each time we call this class, because this is static now, it gets stored and referenced, it gets cached. Let's just call it cached. So this static keyword basically caches whatever this returns. So, and that way, for every time you call it, it references that cache and reuses it. So that's why at this point we can call, the first time we called bingo, with bingo golden retriever, it came here, store the variable bingo golden retriever. At this point for bingo, this has become, total dog has become what? 1. This calls okay, this calls get total dogs, which calls dog get total dogs, and at this point total dog is now what? Is now 1. By the time we go to Labrador, because this is 1, and you know what this does? It increments by 1. This is a new, it references the cache, gets whatever value was stored for total dogs, right? And whatever value was stored for this function, get total dogs. At this point, it was 1. Now, for the second dog, it increments by 1. So now this is 2. So if you call get total dogs, this comes and returns what? Dog dot total dogs, which is now what? 2 at this point. For the third dog, Rex, it comes here and does what? Increments by 1 again. And this becomes what? 1 plus 1 plus 1. For the next dog again, Lassie, it does what? Because it goes to the cache, checks how many, what's the current value of this? 3. Comes here, increments by 1 again, returns what? 1. That's 4, and so on up till it gets to 6. Up till it gets to what? 6. Then it returns what? 6 to us for the final time. And that's basically how we get total number of dogs. Now, what happens if we don't call this static? Let this be static. If total dogs is no longer static, what do you think will happen? Let me delete this one that I added. And delete this one that I added. Okay. Now we can see that even our code is not even running anymore. Why? Because total dogs is no longer static. It doesn't exist on this dog class anymore. So our JavaScript compiler is telling us, our interpreter is telling us that what? Property total dogs may not exist on type what? On type of dog. Because it's no longer static, it's no longer tied to this class. I don't know if we have any questions.
So I don't understand this static something.
Okay.
Because me, I was expecting that if it was static, that these instances will not be able to access it. According to what you're saying, that once
Yes.
they are static, they cannot be accessed outside the main class. But now with the static, they are still accessible. So that's where I got
No,
confused.
don't be confused. Rukaya, don't be confused. They are still not accessible. Where is our, let's go together. Where is our instance? Our instance is dog1, Abby. Right?
Yes.
Let's take one of the
Yes.
instances, dog1. Let's say dog1. So now, what was the static one we want to call? So let's try to get what? Total dogs. Is it possible? Let's see. Total dogs is static here, right? Let's see if it's possible. What does it say? Undefined. The reason it's undefined is because it is static. Our instance doesn't have access to it here. So it's still, do you understand? It's still the same. If it's no longer static, our instance can know that it is 0. But if it's static, our instance no longer has access to it. So it becomes undefined. So it's still the same. It's still the same. Nothing has changed. The only reason this is the only reason we made this static now is because we want to cache the value of these total dogs with reference to this dog class. So now we can easily come here and call this dog class. So now that's why we came here and called this dog class. If we come here and say dog, on that dog class, we want to get what? The total dogs. This dog class will have access to it because it is static. And it says what? You have a total of 6 dogs. Is it clear?
Okay, is it because you are even the parent class dog? That's why we have access to the total.
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
okay, okay.
yes. This dog is the parent class. This dog is an instance of the parent. Because we call the parent class, the parent has access to the static variables, but the instance does not have access to the static variables.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Let's
Yeah, I
let's
get
stop
it now.
here. Let's stop here for today. And I know we've done this. This is actually the last part of JavaScript that we'll be touching before we move to um a front-end programming, a front-end framework. So this is our advanced JavaScript concept. So you can always go over it again. If you don't get it, if you didn't get it today immediately, go over it again. If you have questions, reach out. You can also go online, Google one or two things, come to my DM and ask your questions, and I will respond. These are advanced concepts, so you can take your time to understand it. Let's stop here for today.
Thank you, sir.
Any other question from anybody before we end the class today? Any question? Samuel, Steven, Dauda, Sodiq. I think you are new in this class. I've not seen your name before. Steven Ifemi and Chisimdi Steven. Any question? Any question? Any question? If there's no question, I believe we all understood it then. I'm going to send our assignment across just to be sure we understood everything we've done. Please try to do the assignments. Take your time. If you have questions, reach out, go online, ask Google as much as you can. Reach out. I would try to explain as well in the DM. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir.
All right.